So I guess I'm the closer here in this panel, trying to get you guys fired up and wrap you up and get you going to your workshops. And here's what's fun about this is I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. And kind of the bad news is the Jessie Cox Trust is a charitable lead trust and it's winding down in 2017. And its funding, you know, as many of you know, has really tried to really, especially in the past probably decade, has tried to support the work that you guys are involved in. Large landscape conservation in New England, linkages, connectivity, thinking at this really larger scale. And let me quickly ask you, how many of you have benefited by the Cox Trust or connected your work? Raise your hand, please, just so we get a picture here. Wow, that's pretty neat. So, you know, we are definitely in the right space here. You know, we've seen how your coalitions have advanced the tools, the ideas, the organizational development that has really advanced the field and bringing us where we are today at a, you know, here we are at a meeting that has, you know, increased by another, you know, 50 or so people from the previous year. So there's a lot of energy here. So we've been able to see that and it's really exciting. So we need to celebrate that progress. But, you know, the pace of conservation is still too slow. And, you know, our vision for conservation, as we're hearing here, is not big enough. It's still not bold enough if we're going to meet some of the objectives that people have identified and really kind of internalize those in our strategy. I mean, I think that's what the panelists have been addressing here. So we think RCPs are the key to speeding things up. And the Cox Trust really wants to support this work that you guys have been involved in. You know, think of RCPs. RCPs are a power grid. And you've seen how universities and government and state level are kind of plugging into that now and kind of creating these other systems that are bigger than the smaller approach to conservation that we're working in. So how do you really increase the juice in this power grid? We've been working with Emily Bateson here and Bill Levy from Heisted Foundation to make sure that what the Cox does is to strengthen RCPs and really support the network that you guys are involved in. And I think, Bill, you mentioned early on, you know, what are the benefits of membership, like kind of your AARP card or whatever. You know, I was kind of pissed off this year. I turned 50, but I got a card last year. And I'm like, I'm not even old yet. But, you know, they list their benefits of membership. Well, one of the benefits of membership are things like attracting resources, both state, federal, foundation level. So that's really an important thing that we need to do if we want to build and expand this network and this power grid. So we figured out kind of two funding mechanisms. What we want to do is launch, as of today, a $1 million 3-year initiative for New England to really strengthen large landscape conservation through RCPs and through two mechanisms. A donated land and easement program. The Cox Trust, over the next 3 years, is going to make 2 to 3 grants of about $100,000 a year to cover transaction and due diligence costs associated with conservation transactions of RCPs. So this would be able to, a few RCPs in the first phase, to develop kind of a pooled fund that they allocate to deal with. I mean, you saw what Stephanie was talking about, the Leighton project, you know, the Leighton project, putting all those pieces together, all that kind of interstitial pre-development work, those costs, those are hard to come by. We know that. We've heard that from you all. So this would allow it'll be a competitive process, some RCPs to have that fund, and it's modeled over, modeled on several other funds that we've seen, both the state programs in Massachusetts, but also Quabbin and Cardigan and so forth and other programs. So these are the kind of costs that are slowing you down in getting a landowner to turn over, you know, some land either through easement or through direct sale. And obviously it's going to be really competitive, but we've got some 3 years, so there's a chance to become really ready. And you know, Ken talked about this whole notion of conservation design. So it's probably going to favor organizations that have, you know, some semblance of really good, strong conservation design and opportunity there. So that's one component of the program, the donated land and easement program. The other piece, which is excited, and this is based on the work that Bill Levick has done at the Heisted Foundation on kind of organizational development and the evolution of RCPs. We really wanted to ground it in research and in kind of a theoretical framework, which was really rooted in both the knowledge of the field, but also some hard data about how organizations and networks evolved. We're kind of in an infant stage of understanding how networks evolved and grow and what makes them strong and what's the infrastructure behind this. But I think Bill's work is kind of seminal in the field of conservation, and also Jim Levitt and many others that we've been talking about here, about how do we do this better and how do we move it faster along the kind of the evolutionary continuum. So the Catalyst grant program is pretty cool. It's going to make smaller grants of up to around $20,000 to help build the capacity of RCPs. It'll support small projects like capital campaigns, conservation priority plans, strategic action plans, landowner outreach stuff. We saw some examples of how to, that you have to kind of be pretty aggressive at that. And I think there's some workshops here that are really important to say, how do you do that? How do you structure it? How do you organize it? Concrete projects that help you move from maturing to conserving, moving up kind of an organizational development continuum. And I can rant on capacity building, the notion. I think it's kind of a very weak term. The kind of capacity building we're talking about through this is very, very concrete. It's very specific projects, very things that you can kind of really touch and feel and taste that build your organization and make it stronger. So we're going to announce the program, it's still in development. Some of you are reviewing the RFP and the materials. We're having folks from Open Space Institute also take a look at it and provide recommendations. It's going through a rigorous set of review and lots of eyes, but we're shooting for December 15th. All of you in here are going to get a notice of that. There's going to be a bidders conference, and I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the details at this session here. We want to talk about the themes here, but I'm just letting you know that you'll be very well informed about how it's gonna work out. So what the heck does this have to do with cross-sector collaboration, right? Because what is it going to do? It's going to speed up the flow of donated land, right? That's one of the goals. I think we can be able to count on that, and support these regional kind of concepts and planning. And it's going to increase the functional capacity of RCPs, right? It's going to increase the deal flow. You guys know that some land trusts and networks, you get into kind of a rhythm and you get into kind of a pace and an ability and a capacity to increase the amount of transactional work you can do. Very important. So that's great. Two really important outcomes, and we're really focusing on that as the main thrust of how we're going to evaluate that, the effectiveness of the initiative. But if that's all it is, it's going to be a failure if it's not a stepping stone for the stuff that folks here are talking about, this notion of cross-sector collaboration. It's going to be a failure if it doesn't create a bigger vision for conservation in our region, with allies beyond land trusts and the typical conservation organizations, universities, state organizations, and beyond. It's going to be a failure if the increased capacity of RCPs doesn't help all of you address these bigger challenges: land protection, climate, ecosystem services, sustainability, economic development, and so on. There's bigger issues beyond just that, the land, the very narrow land piece. It's going to be a failure if it doesn't build political capital required to make sure that that we have programs like the one in the state of Massachusetts, or some of the programs that you guys have been involved in developing. Cross-sector collaboration is a form of political capital, right? It's how you translate the public will into political will. And clearly, not a lot is going to happen at the federal level without a lot of push and nudging. Even at the state level, we're kind of sluggish. So this is going to require, once again, a lot of kind of action and activities. I'm less than interested. Obviously for Cox Trust, we are interested in terms of the, moving the needle very clearly on some of these transaction kind of questions, but I'm less interested in the successes of dollars and acres as the ultimate outcome, especially longer term. It's got to be more than that. I'm interested in setting the course for, Wildlands and Woodlands vision. Wildlands and Woodlands is a big enchilada. It's the big thing that is kind of hopefully helping us, guide us. So with that in mind, I have just two questions that can maybe help us build this kind of reach these bold conservation goals. One of them is, how do RCPs develop a political imagination? That's kind of question number one. This is where the cross-sector stuff comes in, because that's where if you start to develop a political imagination, you stretch beyond your usual normal boundaries, right? Second question is, how do we think of the conservation networks that we're building as a political force? Both at the, that big Atlantic regional level, the wildlands and woodlands level, the Canada to New York, and even within your very local networks, how are they a political force? So here's what I'm imagining, just to give you some ideas and maybe provoke the discussion. So I'm imagining that when I walk into your office, next year, and I hope to do so, hopefully, with many of you, and I think, and I hope I can bring the chair of the Cox Trust, Mike Hill is here to meet some of you. I'm hoping that in 5 years, however, that I see on your walls not just maps of your conservation land, but maps of your political relationships. Maps of your, we've all got the maps of the green that we've conserved, but what about the political relationships we're developing? Our allies, whether it's the universities, whether it's the schools, you look at the numbers of the latent political capital we have in our own communities, it's pretty powerful. That would be fun. So I'm imagining that you can show me the database on your phone about, the donors, your allies, your kind of the relationships you have within the kind of the political and social ecosystem that you developed right on your cell phone. That you're that well organized to be able to really think about that. And this kind of documentation of the people power is as good as the documentation of the land that you guys are really good at, about the resource values of the land. And you guys are counting carbon, you're counting, forest quality, et cetera, watersheds, et cetera, et cetera. But what about the people part of this issue? Because the maps of the people are as important as the maps of the land, right? And I always end up asking people to say, well, yeah, great, I love the green here and how you're connected, this, but what about these other important connections that allow you to do that? And people say, well, we haven't really got there yet. I'm getting kind of anxious. I'm tired of asking that question. We have to get there sooner, just because we're not going to we can't transact our way to a broader political will and vision. It's going to require more money and more oomph to really think at a bigger scale. So I'm imagining walking in your office, getting a cup of coffee, going to the coffee maker, the little automatic thingies or whatever, and seeing above that a new manifesto for stewardship, for land stewardship, about how we do that. Citizen-centered land stewardship, tacked above your coffee maker. And maybe it's a manifesto that places stewardship as a central, and civic engagement, kind of as a central organizing framework for the work that you do. I think stewardship, and the way we think about it, is kind of stuck right now. And we saw the slide of the kids and the young people in the kayak and that network too. That's kind of the stuff that gets me excited. Citizen science, linking people to the land, and I think a lot of you have been involved in the community forest movement. A lot of you involved in, certainly with the fishing communities, Trout Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, the hunting communities, et cetera, et cetera. So that's good, but I think we can be a lot more strategic and ambitious about that. So that would be kind of, in terms of the cross-sector collaboration in the politics of this. I'm imagining coming back to the RCP network in, a couple of years, hopefully soon, and maybe introducing the RCP that led a campaign to champion a new source of municipal funding, like the one that Stephanie was talking about. Wouldn't that be cool? Because we're going to need that. Because the Cox Trust, for example, that's just a little, it's $1 million. It's not enough to sustain a lot of these pieces that you guys are putting together. So, with that, we know conservation is really good at the transactional stuff. The conservation organizations, land trusts, and the networks, and so forth. But are they really good at being transformative? I'm not so sure quite yet, I think it becomes transformative when you're talking about these networks that generate kind of this political will and power. And I'm wagering that land trusts working alone, and then in the coming years, they're going to be playing checkers. chess. And this regional stuff, it's all chess. So thanks to Heisted for helping us, think about how to support your work and how to spin this wheel a lot faster.